Oh, I was waiting a little bit just to see if Mr. Patterson was going to show up. He may still, it sounds like. But the clock I'm looking at over here looks like it's maybe about 6:34. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and ask for the roll to be called, please.
Furtado, Patterson, Thorsland, Dillard Myers, Eisenman, Esri.
Here. Thank you. We do have oh, yeah. You didn't call Mr. Goff. Don't.
Here.
I'm sorry about that, Goss.
Here.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't paying 100% attention. Thank you, Jim. Okay, we do have a quorum. Then go ahead and ask for a motion for the approval of agenda and addendum. Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Mr. Thorsland. If you notice, there is a bit of a error on the second page under IX, new business. We have A, B, C. The B and the C are like right there at the same item. So basically, what shows then is D needs to be from C on down. The C is now at part of B. It needs to be all those letters need to be shifted down, and then we basically don't have a G. It ends with F on the next page, the third page of the agenda that was mailed. But other than that correction, is there any other corrections or items, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That's approved. We'll then move on to approval of minutes. We have A, the January 9th, 2020 open meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve those? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Mr. Thorsland. Discussion on those. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. And then we have B, the January 9th, 2020 closed session minutes, which I believe all of us here currently have seen them. Is there a motion to approve those? Moved by Ms. Dillard Myers. Seconded, is there a second by Mr. Goss? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That is passed. We'll then move on to public participation. At this point in time, I have 3 submitted, but only the one person I believe wants to speak during public participation. The other 2 are here in case we have questions later on. Ms. Tammy Fruling-Vogus, would you please come forward, and you have to turn the microphone on, Tammy, if you remember. It's the very bottom button, and then just ask you to speak into the microphone. There it's on with the red light.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was looking for a green light. So, Tammy Fruling-Vogus, Village of St. Joseph. Do you want my full address? Okay.
That's good enough.
Basically, I'm just here again to speak from my heart as far as the issue with the solar farms within the 1.5 mile jurisdiction, RETJ. So I don't have Kelly here tonight to give you all the technical and planning. I'm not a planner as my career. I just am a passionate mayor in the Village of St. Joseph. So just a couple of things. I know you guys have probably reviewed all the previous material that's been submitted, the letters from the other mayors that we've had discussions with and their concerns, and all the previous conversations. I know that's all been part of the previous packets and things. And the only thing that I just wanted to reiterate to you is that it's really important for the village to be a part of the planning process. It's some of our smaller communities maybe haven't always been really good about that, but through the years, we try to do better. I know, I've been on the board since 2005, and I've learned a lot since then. And to me, a comprehensive planning map and your zoning and I was just talking to Susan, we're trying to get our zoning updates done, and by golly, we're going to get it done. And thanks to Susan, she gave us a good start on it. But all of that's so important for our future, for the village. And part of that planning is within our 1.5 miles outside of the village. Um, I'm not going to, go into the discussions on the pros and cons of solar farms, because this isn't about that. It's more just about us being a part of the conversation in regards to solar farms. Our future planning for the village is important. Having a solar farm, matter of fact, I was just speaking with a farmer this week, who's on the south side of our village, who had been previously approached by the group of solar farms that had been here, in 2018 it was, the first ones that came through. And, he chose not to participate in that. But, that was one thing that I tried to stress to you guys early on, is that the solar or the substations are right outside, right on the boundaries of our village, more or less. Of course, that's ideal for the solar farms because it's less expensive for them to do, their infrastructure for the solar farms. Well, that's also a very critical area for us for any future development, because it is also very expensive for us for infrastructure. And if we have these solar farms pin us in on our perimeters, and I said we've got 2 substations to the north and 2 to the south, that leaves us to the east, which we also have a railroad track, which also is no fun to work with, to try and work with crossings and things with railroad. And then we have the river on the west side. So this is critical to any future development for our village, um, restricting it down to a 1/2 mile. So, what we're just asking is that, yes, ideally, we would really hope that we get that 1.5 miles back, even for the special uses of solar farms. Um, it, the other thing is that we just want to be a part of the conversation. If we can sit down at the table and be in part of the discussion with the solar farms as they come to you, um, it would be beneficial to us, because we could maybe explain to them our concerns and our needs. Gosh, I mean, right now, if it's right outside of our village boundaries, we're not going to get the additional tax dollars. The schools, yes, would. But, maybe that would be a consideration too, that if we're going to sacrifice a growth area, on our boundaries, maybe it would be something that we could, consider a annexation agreement with them, and that tax dollars could maybe benefit our village. So that would be important for us to be a part of the conversation. Um, I my concern is, like I said, I've been to several of these meetings now, and I just hope. I was reading through the previous minutes earlier today, and I also had kind of reviewed some of your long range planning goals for the county board. And it seems to me that this is kind of a shared interest, or it seems like this is kind of you guys' goals, the same as our goals. And part of that is working together. And it was a little concerning to me. There was a statement made in the packet that I was reviewing, before this evening. And there was a statement made by a county board member that I thought was very concerning. It says, not, you know, I find it's not as just as a mayor, but also as a citizen that lives in a rural community outside of Champaign-Urbana. The comment was made that the county represents the unincorporated areas on this issue, and that they don't represent the towns. And I just found that troubling, because that doesn't sound to me like working together, hand in hand. I think our towns, whether we're rural, Champaign-Urbana, or whether, should all work together on all of these type of issues, because I think it's important for all of our futures on how we grow, don't grow, and develop, and we should all be part of the planning process. our goal should always be to have an intergovernmental cooperation on all projects that have an impact on any Champaign County citizen, whether you're inside one of our smaller villages or whether you're in the unincorporated areas or if you're in Champaign-Urbana. I mean, we're all Champaign County citizens. And how our village grows and plans for the future should not be taken away from us on some of these decisions that, I know the county board trumps us on a lot of things, but that's where I'm thinking it's important. I think it would be much better for all of us if we just work together the best that we can, and that, those decisions I think would be beneficial for us to work on together. So that's my plea. Again, it's a heartfelt plea. Like I said, I'm not a professional planner by any means, but I'm learning, aren't I, Susan? So anyway, I just thank you.
Thank you. You're free to speak if you want to at public, but I'm just going to ask before we close that. Do you wish to speak, or just in case only if we have questions? Or okay, just double checking. Okay, well, seeing no other public participation, then we'll close that and move on to communications. Are there any communications from any of the board members or staff by chance? Seeing none, we will move on then to 7, new business items for information only. We have A, the IEPA appointment to statewide materials management advisory committee. Ms. Monty.
Yeah, I thought you would want to know this, that I will be serving on this task force or committee. The last time they did this was 5 years ago, and the report is sitting on the shelf. I have better hopes for this round. I was not a part of the previous task force. I just attended several of those meetings, so that's probably why I got asked to be on the task force. And it's a year out, or a year and a half out, that they will provide the report. The report will address how counties have access to resources to do solid waste planning.
Thank you, Ms. Monty. Discussion, anybody have any questions for Susan on that? I'll just say thank you, Susan, for being willing to take on that extra work. We'll then move on to B. Online registration opens February 3rd for residents to attend IEPA one-day household hazardous waste collection. And Ms. Monty, again, if you want to speak to this.
I'll just note that this time around, we're being careful to work better with the hazardous waste contractor through the IEPA, and we'll try to have more drop-off lines, more staff present, and we're registering fewer residents. So there's about 350 appointment times left, and it's first come, first serve.
I'll just go ahead and ask Susan, do you know how many? I know that the people who didn't get a chance, they were registered and weren't able to get through the line last time, they were given first chance. Do you have any idea how many of took advantage of that to re-register again before it was open to the public?
Yes, and Nicole Millage at the City of Champaign is doing that online registration stuff. So she indicated to me that 150 to 200 persons had followed up in response to an invitation to have first shot.
Okay, that's good to know. That just at least answered a question I had. Any other questions or discussion on this? Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to C. We have the IEPA notice of application for renewals of MPDES permit for Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District Northeast Plant. This is pretty straightforward. There's nothing we really do with this other than accept it and basically, I guess you could say place it on file. Is there any discussion on that, John? Is there anything else you want to say? So I guess I'll just say we'll go ahead and accept that and place it on file. And then we'll move on to 8, new business items to receive and place on file by ELEC committee to allow a 30-day review period. We have A, zoning case 947-AT-19, amend the Champaign County zoning ordinance by amending the requirements for a PV solar farm by deleting section 6.1.5 B2B that requires a 0.5 mile separation between a proposed PV solar farm and the CR Conservation Recreation Zoning District. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Thorsland, seconded by Ms. Furtado. Discussion. Or John, do you want to say something to this first?
You may remember when this was discussed at the committee, after going through the round of solar farm reviews in 2018, this separation just seemed to be more problem than benefit. And while we're going back and updating the solar farm requirements, we wanted to include this as a text amendment. We got no comments at the ZBA. The ZBA voted to recommend this. It was not a unanimous vote. There was one ZBA member that thought we should retain this separation. And so it's here, it's back here at the committee.
Thank you. Further discussion. I know we have seen this before, except that obviously Ms. Dillard Myers hasn't necessarily seen this, but that's up. Microphone, please. Just ask you to use your microphone, please. For the record, it's not on for it. There you
Then
go.
we speak about this 1.5 mile thing before. This is a different one? Oh, okay.
This is different. This is to separate it from the conservation recreation zoning area. That there are those areas out in the county. A lot of those are like along the rivers and such. Or go ahead. And the idea at first was to separate the solar farms from that, thinking that there could be like some conflict, I guess you could say. But it's at least staff, that means since they're the one proposing it, you could say it's after working through all the solar farm ordinance and stuff, well, with the plantings, the vegetation, I should say, that will be within the solar farm, that if anything, it's potentially adding to that conservation area. It's not necessarily, it's not going to at least detract from the conservation. It could enhance it, not going to necessarily guarantee it. I'm a little bit speaking for myself here. I'm not going to say that it will, but it shouldn't really hurt the conservation area. That's kind of the thinking for this. It was put in originally, and it's kind of seen now as maybe it's not necessary, is the thinking behind it. Ms. Furtado.
And just to make sure I'm entirely sure what I'm voting on, right now, we're just voting to put this on the 30-day review, correct? That's how I read the packet, but I just want to make sure.
But yeah, Stephanie, you're correct. This is just for 30 days, so we'll see this again next month. Further discussion? Seeing none, ask for all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That is passed. We'll then move on to B, zoning case 97-AT-19, amend the Champaign County zoning ordinance by amending the requirements for PV solar farms by amending the requirements for a letter of credit in section 6.1.5 Q4E to change the minimum acceptable long-term corporate debt credit rating of the proposed financial institution to a rating of A- by Standard & Poor's, or a rating of A3 by Moody's, or a rating of A- by Kroll Bond Rating Agency. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Mr. Thorsland. Discussion on this. Most of us on the committee again have seen this before and heard the reasoning. Yeah, go ahead, John. If you
When this was at the committee before, it was actually proposing to add a lower requirement for a bank headquartered in Champaign County. When we finally did get the review by the state's attorney, they recommended against that. And so the ZBA discussed it. You might have seen one of the attachments was the comparison of the ratings. So all of these nationally recognized rating agencies, it seems, have similar rating structure. It's various classes, and these ratings are all in the same class. Originally, we were at the mid-range of that class, but the bank headquartered in Champaign County actually has a rating in the lower level of that class. It's still the same rating for the overall class. And when the ZBA looked at this, they decided, well, there's really not much added risk to the county. Not only would it allow then banks headquartered in Champaign County, but it would allow a wider variety of financial institutions to provide these letters of credit. So they thought it was a good change. I went ahead and just dealt with this at the ZBA. So this is somewhat different than what this committee originally reviewed. I hope that, the written materials answer all your questions. And that's really all I want to say unless there's a question.
Thank you, John. For Mr. Goss.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, this is subject to an annual renewal anyway, correct? Or an annual review, sorry.
Not annual, I'm thinking it's subject to a 3-year review.
Yeah, I'm not all that comfortable with 3 years. A lot can happen in the banking world in 3 years. I was thinking it was an annual review or an annual renewal for the letter of credit, but
Was that after?
after
I'm somewhat
construction.
remember at startup. Maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, I
For,
don't-
it's similar to the wind farm, once every 3 years for the first 12 years, and then once every 2 years thereafter. So,
So is it that the current requirements are above these levels?
they're slightly above. They're in the
So-
same general category, but
So looking at the chart on page 24, am I correct? You would
yes.
have to be in the AAA or the AA rating or the A+.
Actually, the darker green there, A and A2, are the current ratings, and this text amendment proposes to lower them to the lighter green ratings, A to A minus, A2 to A3, and then adding the new one, A minus for the Crow.
Oh, okay. So the dark green one is the current rate.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Furtado.
It does seem to me that in section 61SQ, C, that it says whenever the most current long-term corporate debt rating or the proposed financial institution drops below the acceptable, that they have to replace it. So that seems to me that the trigger, like, there is a review, but also if it drops at any time, even if it's in the middle, that it is their own. Now, again, if we're not reviewing it, except for, I guess it could fall through the cracks, but it does say that they're supposed to get a different letter of credit from an institution whenever that happens. That the lowering of that bond rating should trigger it.
That's what's supposed to happen. It's not actually reviewed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with putting the onus on
Right.
the solar farm people to know when that drops. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think the bank's gonna volunteer that information as a general rule.
Right.
Hey, by the way, our credit rating dropped to B.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're gonna volunteer that information. So I mean, that's my only complaint. Again, you hope that they're honest about it, but again, I doubt they've got somebody that's paying attention to it, especially a Champaign County bank.
But the language that we're talking about, the timing is in the current, what we passed, that's already existent. So if we wanted to change that, we would then have to reopen up that article, correct?
Now, I'm also happy, you know, if the committee wants to start reviewing these on an annual basis. It's simple enough matter to hop on the internet, get the current ratings, and do that at the beginning of each year. That way the committee is on top of it. I mean, requiring county review so that we know that it gets done is the only way to make sure that gets
Yeah.
done anyhow.
What kind of, is that a big burden? Who would follow up? Would that be the zoning office?
Yeah,
Okay.
all this information is publicly available if you're patient enough with the websites.
Right, yeah,
Um,
I've looked at those. They're
so-
sometimes a mess by, I think, design. So long ago when we talked about this, part of it was to try to let this Kroll rating come into this as a factor. It was the original intent, I think, was to give them an opportunity. Also, the way it is now, if we leave it the way it is, then all we do is not allow them in unless their rating goes up. Is that correct?
Well, if you leave it the way it is now, a bank that gets rated only by Kroll is never eligible.
Right.
And
You think that it'd put an undue burden on the developers?
I'm not going to say it puts an undue burden, but it shuts out any Champaign County, any
Right,
banks
and that
headquartered in
was
Champaign
the
County.
intent. So I don't want to be the person who shuts out Champaign County, a banker that would do it. And I'd be very happy with this annual sort of check. If that's not a difficult thing to add to it, maybe that would make you feel more comfortable with letting them jump in too.
Yeah, I don't want to say that I would stop this. I just think it's something that I think it's better if we, especially if it's just hopping on and checking it. I think that stuff is sort of published even occasionally in the News Gazette, but I hate to rely on local news sources and to be honest, for us to read it and remember. I mean, because we're not always gonna be on here. So I think if we just review it one time a year, and I don't know how many we're gonna have, but at this point, we've got one or two potentially. So-
Potentially, and we already do, we're coming up on starting to do the wind farm review every other year. So this added to that, I mean, that's actually a more, getting the wind farm company to pay attention to our rules and reply in a timely manner is always difficult, although I had some good calls this week. I think that's going to get better with time. So my hope is that we can just make this a standard part of the January meeting. Or I'm not familiar.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I would think you might want to maybe push it to February or March, just because I think that stuff's done at the end of the year and maybe not published until February or March.
Okay, yeah, we'd have to take that into account.
Yeah,
So,
whatever that time is, I don't care what month it is. I think we ought to just make it a standard. Hey, we reviewed these, everybody's still in compliance, and
Okay.
we can rubber stamp it, or we can say, hey, we need to make a phone call.
So, Mr. Hall, to make that request, have we already made that, or do we need to put that somewhere, like in the next meeting, since it's not an action item or part of this?
well,
to
it's an
do it.
action item for me now, so.
Well, okay, well, I mean, we've obviously made the request, I'd say, as a committee. But do we need to truly have that written out somewhere? And if so, do we need to bring it to a meeting just to truly vote on it and make it, this is what we want?
That's a good question. I mean, to make sure that it actually gets done, I'm not aware of any other thing like this except providing monthly reports. I'm expected to provide monthly reports. So I'll think about that. If I can think of a better way to document that so future zoning administrators will know about that, I'll make a recommendation. I really don't have anything right now. But once again, every month we get a report on the wind farm escrow account. So I'm dealing with these kinds of things every month, and any future zoning administrator is going to deal with it every month. So it shouldn't be the kind of thing that gets overlooked.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. Okay, is there further discussion on this?
Well,
Mr. Thorson, go ahead.
Just so we're clear, then, we've given you direction to come to us with something to make it an annual event, and I want to make sure that that gets to us and then back through, so, and then I'm much more comfortable.
Okay, ready to vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and skip over to the addendum. When I'm looking at this, maybe we have a little more that didn't quite get lettered and stuff quite right, because we have IXA under the addendum and we have IXA under the original agenda too. But so I don't know, maybe call this IXAA but anyway, let's go ahead and take care of the addendum since it is under IX for 9. We have new business items to be approved by ELUC. We have A, the annual renewal of recreation and entertainment license. And if there's no objection, I'll do this omnibus, just the two of them together. We have I, the Generations Music Booking NFP for Christian Music Festival, Champaign County Fairgrounds, 1302 North Kohler Avenue, Urbana, July 1st through July 4th, 2020. And then we have the II2 or 2, Blue Stem Hall, Weddings and Events, 1401 East Old Church Road, Urbana, 1/1/2020 through 12/31/2020. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Patterson, seconded by Mr. Thorsland. Discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay? None. Okay, thank you. That's passed. Okay, now we'll then go back to the agenda. We have 9 new business. These are items to be recommended to the county board. We have A, zoning case 968-AM-19, a request by Kyle Britt, 412 Deer Path Street, Tolono, and Alex Wilson, 134 West Orleans Street, Paxton, doing business as Big Rig Diesel Service, LLC, to amend the zoning map to change the zoning district designation from the AG1 Agriculture District to the B3 Highway Business District in order to establish a major automobile repair shop on a 6.8 acre tract in the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter and the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 12, Township 18 North, Range 10 East of the 3rd Principal Meridian in Sidney Township, commonly known as part of the former Agrigenetics tract, with an address of 2310 County Road 1050 North, County Highway 15, Homer. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Ms. Dillard Myers. This is the agenda item that the two gentlemen are in the audience for, if there are any questions. So discussion, open the floor up for discussion, or if, Mr. Hall, if you have anything to say to this. I'll just say that knowing where this is, right where this is at, if you know where Frito-Lay is, it's basically right across the road from Frito-Lay, between Sidney and Homer. And I forget how long the buildings basically haven't been used now. It's been probably at least a couple years, I think, maybe a little longer than that. Not terribly long, but it's been a few different genetics kind of seed research, you could say, corn research like that businesses. I first knew it, and I believe it was first built as Vineyard Seeds. Seeing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That's passed unanimously. Congratulations. Still has to pass the county board, but it passed here unanimously. But then we're on to 9B, resolution authorizing Brookfield Properties and Champaign County event agreement for IEPA one-day household hazardous waste collection on April 4th, 2020. Is there such a motion? Moved by Ms. Dillard Myers, seconded by Mr. Thorsland. This is basically just the follow-up for the actual agreement to the that collection, hazardous waste collection that we discussed earlier. Ms. Monty, do you have anything else to add, really? Any further discussion? Mr. Patterson?
I just want to note that this is both item B and C on our agenda.
We shifted everything down, Kyle. So, you weren't here. So we have like no G. We have, it ends now with F. So everything shifts down. Yeah, no problem. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That's passed unanimously. We are then to C. We have resolution approving Champaign County opt-in form to Illinois EPA to participate in manufacturer e-waste program in 2021. There's such a motion. Moved by Mr. Patterson, seconded by Mr. Thorsland. Discussion on this. Ms. Monty, do you want to say anything on this, really?
Well, there's the note that it's non-binding. In the event that we do locate a program collection site, we can switch from the one-day collection events to the operating a program collection site.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We're now to D, zoning case 945-AT-19. Excuse me. Amend the Champaign County zoning ordinance requirements for a photovoltaic solar farm in section 6.1.5B2 of the Champaign County zoning ordinance by adding the following requirements for any proposed PV solar farm that is located within 1.5 miles of a municipality. Part A, increase the minimum required time for municipal review as described in the legal advertisement. Part B, require municipal subdivision approval for any PV solar farmland lease exceeding 5 years when required by any relevant municipal authority that has an adopted comprehensive plan. Part C, amend section 8.2.3 to allow any PV solar farm authorized prior to the effective date of this amendment and that is in the process of being repaired to not lose its zoning right to operate. Part D, add new section 8.2.4 to allow any PV solar farm authorized prior to the effective date of this amendment to be constructed pursuant to the standard requirement of a zoning use permit, provided that the special use permit for the solar farm has not expired. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Thorsland, seconded by Ms. Furtado. Discussion on this. Mr. Thorsland.
Yeah, I'm glad this is back before us. Both of these, and you know, they're related to 946, which we'll talk about in a minute. I appreciate the mayor coming and speaking about working together. I agree with most of that. I think that a lot of these, I like what staff has come up with. I'm in complete agreement with this extra time, extra notification time with these. One of the things that if you read deeper into the ordinance, you'll see that any municipality or village that has a CUGA already, this excludes it from the continuous urban growth area, which gives a level of protection to people who have come up with those. I'm not in favor of pushing them out for a few reasons. One that's been pointed out many times is then we just waive it anyway. These solar farms do want to be close to the substations. We saw a good case of the village working with a solar farm developer when they took the sort of two-part solar farm around Sydney and they moved it right below the case we just voted on for the diesel mechanic shop in Frito-Lay, and it all went to the east of the village. They worked with the village to do that, and I think this extra time gives opportunity for all that kind of dialogue. I find it interesting. This is just by observation. I spend sometimes, unfortunately, outside of my control, time in other countries where solar farms have been in existence for a long time. And they're integrated into all kinds of space right in the middle of towns, right on the edges of towns, next to railroad tracks is a great place for them to be. So I often get a little baffled by the fuss. There's not a lot of these. We certainly need power. If the village wants to grow, they need power. So I'm in support of leaving it at the half mile. We just saw that we thought the CR wasn't a problem to allow them even closer than the half mile in the CR. Aaron pointed out that, there's an argument on either side, but the Illinois solar farm people have learned that planting pollinator plants and things and not letting the Illinois grass grow under these things is in their best interest and turns out to be beneficial. So I think overall, we shouldn't discourage proposed ones. They all come before us anyway, and we can discuss details. I'm very happy with the extra time of notice, and I would be in support of 9:45, not so much as 9:46.
Thank you, Ms. Furtado.
I want to echo those, and I want to clarify. Maybe I spoke inelegantly at the last meeting. I definitely think the county board represents all members, and I want to work with the towns. I do think what I was saying is that the zoning authority of the board is to represent the members who are in the unincorporated areas. We don't have the same. This committee doesn't have the same zoning authority over the incorporated areas. And I think that that's an important distinction. And while I think that that this is a good compromise, that giving more time, I don't think anybody on the board is in interest of working against the towns and putting solar farms where they would impede further development. But I do think that constituents deserve to have clear zoning authority to whom they go to, and that shouldn't be multiple layers of zoning authority because they're in that ambiguous area. And I think that, as my colleague said, the process has worked. That we've already demonstrated a willingness of all the parties to come together and work to good solutions. And I think the extended review period of time and the ability for the towns to weigh in would, of course, be considered, by everybody on the board. But just to see that authority, I don't think is a good precedent, and is not something I'm comfortable with. So I'm happy that there's these changes in terms of timing and all of that. And, I would look askance at any company that came and was like, we were asked, well, have you talked to the towns? And they said, no. I don't think nobody on the board is going to support that. But to formally give away that authority is not something that I'm comfortable with, because I think that those constituents deserve to have clear jurisdiction.
Thank you. Further discussion. I'll just go ahead and add, I believe I'm going to be voting against this one tonight because it doesn't have the extra addition of the 1.5 mile radius. The towns have requested it. We are the final say, so we can pass we can give them a variance for that anyway. We are the final say. The towns don't control us. They shouldn't control us, but we should work together. I don't see that future solar farms we will necessarily automatically rubber stamp them, because we don't know where the next one may be proposed, how it may look. They may not be as willing to work with the village that if they're proposing to come up against one, they may not be as willing to work with the village as much as Baywa appeared to have been willing to work with the village of Sydney. So for that reason, the rest of this amendment, the 945, I have no problem with the extra time and everything like that, which is repeated in the 946, but because of the, this does not have the mile and a half, increasing it out to the mile and a half is why I'll be voting against this one. So, that's what I'll be doing. So that's my thoughts. Further discussion, Mr. Goss.
Yeah, I won't be supporting it as well, just because my constituents have asked me not to support it. So again, I think we can work within it, but that's why I can't support it.
Didn't come on. Any further discussion? We've probably just about talked it all out. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Oh, yes, Tammy. Yes, is there any objection to? Okay, that's just ask for the record if you speak into the microphone, please, Tammy.
Usually don't all the time anyway, but I just wanted to point out two things just for a little clarification. The one thing about the mile and a half that, you know, and I understand the closeness and stuff, it is desirable for them, but they have a better ability to make money on these solar farms than the villages as far as infrastructure cost to us. If we have to work around a solar farm for future growth, you know, if one does develop within that half mile of our boundaries, and then we, you know, have an opportunity to grow, then if, you know, and I appreciate, you know, that you're all giving us the consideration as far as the conversation and being part of that, because I do think that's important, whichever way we go here. But part of that discussion and working with the solar farms is for our infrastructure. It's very expensive for the village, whether it's sidewalks, stormwater, sewer, and if you have to go around a solar farm, most of the time you're not going to be able to go through the solar farm because, you know, they have their infrastructure that goes into the ground. You know, our ability, I mean, I'm struggling right now in the village to catch up on some infrastructure just within our village. And, you know, the tax dollars just aren't there. You know, I mean, you all know we're stretched pretty thin on our tax dollars. So, you know, and even nowadays it's changed with developers. It used to be you could get a developer to come in and foot all the costs. Now that's a balancing act between communities and developers to pay for some of that infrastructure. So, you know, solar farms are in a little better position as far as paying for, if they had to be a little further away from a village, to pay for their infrastructure to get to that substation. You know, they have a better ability as far as making money because that's their business. They're you know, making you know, pretty decent money, and they have tax credits coming their way also. But so for a village to come up with the money to try to go around or whatever would be very difficult. And the only other thing I wanted to add is, you know, we're talking about communicating with the solar farms. The earlier solar farms that came back in 2018, I will tell you, we had two very different experiences with those solar farms. The one solar farm group came to us and was very, very helpful. They met with us a couple different times. They came to our meeting. They were willing to work with us and listen to our concerns. And a matter of fact, I've still had a couple conversations with them. You know, theirs didn't get an approval on this last go round, but they, you know, have just been great to work with, and I would never have any problem with it. But on the other ones, on the other hand, that was with the other group that came in, they sent their token email to us because I think that was what was required of them. I responded that, or basically it was an acknowledgement that yes, I received your email, and that was it. I never heard another peep from them, and they never reached out to us. They never asked us if we had any questions. Matter of fact, from the time we got the first notice to the time when they had the very first meeting here, they had already changed the representatives that was even to be in contact with. And then they sat right here in the meeting and, you know, actually weren't even very attentive throughout the entire meeting when everybody was voicing their concerns. And so, you know, and I pointed that out to them. And by golly, I did get a phone call the very next day from them, But even at that, they didn't even pursue that any harder after the fact while it was still being discussed. So I do think it's important that, stressing with these solar farms, yes, you're going to have some really great ones that are willing to work with you, but then you're going to have a group like that that just, they don't give a hoot about us. They're just there to do their business and build their solar farms and do what they do. And most of them are not local people here, so they're not invested in the community and the people of the community in Champaign County or our villages. So once again, I'm being very passionate, but I just wanted to point out those two things. Thank you.
Mr. Thorsland.
Yeah, thank you again for that, and I hear your passion. The county's job is to give a hoot about the people that are in this, right up to your border, not a half a mile away, but right up to your border. As a landowner who has property that's in a mile and a half to another village, I'm affected by the village's rules without the ability to get any representation in that village. And this is what the mile and a half does. We're not proposing to change this ordinance to let them go right to the border of your town or any town. A mile and a half is a substantial amount of space. I don't want to preclude a person like me who has property that's potentially developable as a solar farm that's in a mile and a half, but not a half a mile, to have a farm come in that maybe would generate revenue on some property for someone, and have our ordinance say, well, the village, who you don't elect representation for, has said that the county isn't allowed to let you do that. And it's really what the ETJ is reaching far out for obvious reasons. But the Cougar is part of that. Do you have a Cougar in your town? Do you have a continuous urban growth area already planned out? Does it extend beyond a half a mile at this time? Do you envision that? You talked about infrastructure and going in and around it and all of that. When you're asking developers who aren't doing it anymore and you're giving them incentives to do it, then maybe you're at the limits of some development anyway. I'm not in support of preventing someone that's in that mile that is beyond the half mile already being effectively given up by our representation here, to not have an opportunity. I'm sorry you had a bad experience with the one solar farm. I'm very happy you had a good experience with the other one. They have to come to us, and we're going to try to make them be a good experience for everyone here. So again, 945, I think, gives more equitable distribution to the people that we represent, as my colleague very well pointed out. And as much as it seems maybe we're not working with the village, this half mile is already a big buffer zone working with people. And then we're going to get a chance to try to get the proposed solar farms to work. They're going to try to go where the landowners want it, and I don't want to prevent the landowners from having it. And I don't want to push them too far back that they just go somewhere else. I think the revenue is good for the schools, the power is good for everybody, and for the landowners who were affected by this is a stable income on agriculture land and a very tough time for people who are in agriculture. I wish someone would propose one on my property because it wouldn't take me very long to say yes. So that's all.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay?
Nay.
I'm going to ask for a show of hands, just the way I heard it. So all in favor, please raise your hand. I see 3. All opposed, please raise your hand. I see 3. That's a tie. So that moves on to the county board, but with no recommendation. Yep. Okay. We're now then to E, zoning case 946-AT-19. Amend the Champaign County zoning ordinance requirements for a photovoltaic PV solar farm in section 6.1.5 B2 of the Champaign County zoning ordinance by adding the following requirements for any proposed PV solar farm that is located within 1 1/2 miles of a municipality. Part A, increase the minimum required separation between a PV solar farm and a municipal boundary from 0.5 mile to 1.5 miles. Part B, same as Part A in case 945 AT-19, increase the minimum required time for municipal review as described in the legal advertisement. Part C, which is the same as Part B in case 945, require municipal subdivision approval for any PV solar farmland lease exceeding 5 years when required by any relevant municipal authority that has an adopted comprehensive plan. Part D, same as Part C in case 945, amend Section 8.2.3 to allow any PV solar farm authorized prior to the effective date of this amendment, and that is in the process of being repaired to not lose its zoning right to operate. And Part E, which is the same as Part D in case 945, add new Section 8.2.4 to allow any PV solar farm authorized prior to the effective date of this amendment to be constructed pursuant to their standard requirement of a zoning use permit, provided that the special use permit for the solar farm has not expired. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Ms. Dillard Myers. Is there a discussion on this? We've probably, it's to be expected since they're so closely interrelated. We've probably already said what we're going to say, but I'll open it up if there is any, obviously, discussion. It's what we're here for. Seeing none, I'll then ask for all in favor. Please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Nay. I'm seeing that it's 3-3 again. So again, that's a tie. Moves on by board rules. It moves on to the county board with not out any recommendation. Okay, thank you. We're then to F, zoning case 948-AT-19. Amend the Champaign County zoning ordinance by amending section 8.3.2 to authorize a variance to rebuild a non-conforming structure before the structure is damaged. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Thorsland. Seconded by Mr. Goss. Discussion on this. Mr. Goss.
Yeah, John, can you?
No, I
read
can't.
this a couple of times. I'm so confused.
Well, you have we've received a municipal protest on this from the city of Urbana. I think it's safe to say the city of Urbana thinks that if you have a non-conforming structure, that they don't think you should entertain a variance until the structure has been damaged to more than 50% of its value. Of course, if that structure is your dwelling, that means you got no place to live until the zoning case gets dealt with by the zoning board. And to be fair, one of the Urbana council members said if this was limited just to dwellings, he would have a different opinion about it. But it's applies to all structures in the county zoning jurisdiction, and they just didn't think that was a good thing. So it wasn't a unanimous vote. 2 of the council members voted to not have a protest, but you have a protest. I also think it's fair to say that the discussion at the council sort of settled on the fact that, well, look, voting for a protest doesn't mean they can't do it. It just raises the bar. So it's actually a good discussion to watch on the city website. For one who likes to go to meetings, it's a good discussion to watch.
Mr. Thorsland.
Yeah, when I was on the zoning board, we did this all the time. This was always a concern with the non-conforming. And as you pointed out in some of the notes, a lot of people didn't know they had one until they came in for something else. I would hate to see somebody have to go through the sausage grinder of waiting if their house was damaged in a storm beyond 50%. And the same would go for a business building or something. And I don't quite fully understand Urbana either, but maybe I never have. And that doesn't have to be in the minutes, but I know, I'll own it. But I might actually watch this meeting for the discussion, but I don't, I'm in support of this. I think that anyone who spent any time actually in zoning meetings would be in support of it, and certainly anyone affected by something terrible like this happening to them would certainly want us to be in support of it. And that goes for in and out of town. If, you know, there's a question about what constituency uh, we're dealing with here. So in that, you know, this raises the bar at the county board, yeah. So hopefully we can go over the bar. But I guess a good message would be to send this out of this committee with support. So.
Thank you, Mr. Thorsland. Further discussion? Yeah, Mr. Hall, could you explain it for Ms. or
Turn on the mic for Mike's sake. I've heard everything everybody said here, but what does this have to do with us? It seems like it's all City of Urbana. Is it something they want you to change in our zoning structure?
No, this is something we're proposing to change, and state law allows municipalities to protest changes to county zoning. Now, for example, it might be possible to enact this amendment everywhere except within the Urbana ETJ, but that raises equal treatment issues. So when one municipality of all the municipalities in the county protests a county zoning text amendment, it ups the bar. 17 county board members will have to vote for this. So this is not something unique to Urbana. This is state law that allows gives municipalities this protest right. This is a little more insight into this mile-and-a-half discussion.
So, okay, exactly what is it that Urbana does not like?
I can't. They think that if you have a non-conforming structure, you should not be able to get a variance to rebuild it until it's damaged.
So I have a she shed in my backyard and I want a new one, and the old one is not falling down. I couldn't tear it down and replace it. Is that what you're
If
saying?
it's too close to the property lines, that would make it non-conforming. And under this change, you could come in and get a variance to do that before you need to. But Urbana says, no, you should wait until the structure is damaged and then apply for. I see your understanding.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, because I wasn't getting that. I just was reading it and I didn't see the point at all. Thank you.
Yeah, just to help you out, just because maybe, you know, because I was on zoning board for so long, I dipped into it. Non-conforming is a really sometimes unfair term for something. It means that there's something on your property or a structure that maybe was built before there was zoning, or maybe genuinely people didn't know. We've had garages that are, 6 inches closer to the border than they're supposed to be, and by definition, they're non-conforming. What this allows is that before it's damaged to some terrible state, that you can already have in hand the ability to rebuild it where it was, and she shed or house or business, and as John said, when a municipality protests, we have to get 17 votes at the county board. So
stop.
yeah, without getting on my ETJ soapbox too much, this is another instance where the municipalities want to have more authority over what we do in our ETJ, despite the fact that we have no authority of what they do within their borders. In an effort to work together, I think we should maintain as much of the ETJ that's our responsibility as possible.
And I want to stress that the process that the Zoning Board of Appeals goes through in hearing these variances, it's the same process whether it would be today or 5 years from now when the structure is damaged. We send out notices to the highway jurisdiction. We send out notice to the township supervisor. We send out notices to all neighbors within 250 feet. So we put everyone on notice that this variance has been requested. And I have absolute faith that the zoning board will make the proper decision, whether it's today or 5 years from now when they're looking at a damaged structure. I just think it's better to allow someone who's thinking about this ahead of time to correct it in a timely way.
Yeah, I kind of just don't comprehend the idea that we would incentivize people to wait till something was damaged to maintain their infrastructure on their property. That just, it doesn't make any sense. And as Mr. Thorsland said, the argument that Urbana's making, well, if we annex it, then it would have a different rule. Well, yes. And I said this to St. Joe, like, there has to be, like, this is our zoning authority, and so I don't find that to be a particular, like, people should know, right, like, what who they're supposed to talk to, and this is our decision. And I think that making sure that people don't have to wait till something's damaged to fix it and to come to us is, to me, just makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely gonna go back and watch the once. Is it up? Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna. Was that the last one?
It was the January 13th.
January 13th. Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna go watch that because I'm trying to picture like what the argument is, and I can't in my mind get to it. So I really want to see what their argument was.
Go ahead, Mr. Patterson.
Quick question. It says that the Urbana Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend defeating a resolution of protest. Who brings forward a resolution of protest?
Well, this is the way the city always reviews. Their standard procedure is to assume a protest.
Or
And-
that's very Urbana.
Yes, And I have no problem with that. That's the way we normally operate. So what we always want to see is them defeat the protest, which is what their plan commission recommended. It's what their staff recommended. And then come to find out, the city council differed on that.
Further discussion, or is it clear as mud? at least maybe from what we see it from Urbana's. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passed unanimously. Okay, we are then on to 10, other business. We have A, monthly report. We have I, the September 2019, and double I, October 2019. Is there any discussion on those questions for Mr. Hall or John? Go ahead and.
I just
comment.
would like to point out that under zoning case activity in the October monthly report, by the end of October, we had 35 cases filed compared to 28 in 2018, which we thought was a busy year. The ZBA had dealt with 42 cases compared to 26 in 2018, and we had fewer cases pending at the end of the month. So Susan Bergstrom, who is our planner that staffs the ZBA, and the ZBA itself, we had even more cases that were filed in November and December. So 2019 is just, it's a huge year for the ZBA. So I want you to know that your staff and your ZBA did a really great job in 2019.
Thank you for pointing that out, John. Appreciate that. Further discussion, questions real quick? Seeing none, we'll receive and place those on file. Chair's report. Have nothing other than to just say thanks for coming out on a not so great night. Not absolutely terrible, but then on to designation of items to be placed on the consent agenda. On the original agenda, I have 9A, the zoning case 968 AM 19, B and C. And then go on down to F, the zoning case 948-AT-19.
Can't put that can't go on consent. I don't think, can it?
With the well, if it needs
If it needs
17,
I think
because
you're gonna have to
that's
roll.
Well, the consent agenda is approved by everybody. And it is roll call.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, good points. No problem. No problem, Mr. Goss. Yeah, I was one thing right. So yeah. So we'll leave it on the consent agenda at this point in time. Unless someone wants to. It can be pulled at the meeting. Any one of us can pull it at the meeting.
Can we just not designate? And I feel like, because, I mean, how often do municipal protests happen?
Not very often. I only know of one in the, like, 17 years I've been working with the ZBA. One other protest.
So, yeah, I didn't know if because of the significance, if we wanted to.
If you want to hold it off, Mr. Patterson, you can hold it off. We can hold it off. We'll leave it. Okay, we'll leave it on the consent agenda for now. So those are the items. What's that? Those are approved by ELUC. So those are done with since we approved them, other than a few signatures. So with that, I'll call the meeting adjourned. It looks like it's about 7:44, 45 from here. Thank you.